Charles Harbison has been a friend of mine for what's nearly been 20 years. We worked together at Banana Republic in Raleigh, North Carolina, where we became fast friends. He later moved to New York to study fashion, worked as a designer at several well-respected companies such as Jack Spade and Michael Kors. He was plucked to design and launch womenswear for Billy Reid, and later left to create Harbison, his modern line of clothing and accessories known best for its color blocking, and oh yeah, being worn by the likes of one Beyonce. I love this episode because we talk about all of the ins and outs of starting a fashion label and what it's like being an entrepreneur, raising capital, having his lights shut off due to not being able to afford to pay his light bill, while at the same time being chosen to speak at the White House. Perpetually needing money to fuel the business would be an understatement, and Charles has been through it all. Here's the crazy thing. If you are ever lucky enough to meet Charles, you will fast be electrified by his ear-to-ear grin that will no doubt be on his face, if for not his absolute enthusiasm for design, creativity, and discovery. He and I grab a coffee and or a meal at some point in my routine visits to Los Angeles, and I always depart utterly inspired. He's truly a special soul I feel so fortunate to call a friend, so I think you'll enjoy this one. I'm your host, Wesley Smith, and you're listening to the Standard Age Podcast. One of my favorite people on the planet, Charles Harbison.
What's up, man?
Welcome to the podcast, man.
I'm excited to be here, dude.
Oh, man, I'm excited to have you. So I mean, it's almost kind of hard to start because I know so much about you, but I feel like I'm about to learn a bunch of other stuff. That,
you know, most everything about me.
Well, that's the thing, right? So it's just kind of funny to be like recording and putting like just literally laying down a track.
What
our
day-to-day conversations look like.
Yeah. Well, so for those who are listening and don't know you, let's start at the beginning. Where were you born? Where'd you grow up? What was your house like? Meaning like the environment, not
of course.
Doesn't matter if it's two
Tin
stories
roof.
or not. Yeah, exactly. Tin roof. Yeah. No, but seriously, where'd you grow up? How was that?
I grew up in Lincolnton, North Carolina. It's like in the foothills below the Appalachian Mountains. I had a really amazing, connected, humble upbringing that was probably made more volatile and traumatic just by way of the fact that I was growing up as a queer boy in that space. Super Protestant Baptist upbringing. My dad was a professional football player for a spell and then came back to North Carolina after playing for the USFL and a stint with the Buffalo Bills. I have faint memories of that going on while I was around probably birth to 3. Then he came back to North Carolina. Both my parents, for the most part, were factory workers. I was super sporty, but also super nerdy and super artistic as a kid. I think my truest self was the nerdy art boy, but the version of me that I knew made my father proud was the sporty version of me, playing football and basketball and baseball.
Yeah.
I was good. Man. And then cut to high school, just kind of found my groove in terms of, I guess, being an overachiever. It felt like it was a space of safety and untouchability, which is what I really wanted as I was trying to figure out who I was in the world, knowing that I was very different from all the archetypes around me.
Sure.
And
how old were you approximately when we're talking like this mentality?
Probably like 14, 15, 16.
Formative years.
Formative, super formative.
Yeah.
And so many questions. But also so much excitement because I could feel myself finding my legs and establishing autonomy in terms of my thinking, which I'm really grateful for. My family, for all of their I guess, the kind of clean and some would say simplistic nature that working class families can have. I don't find it simplistic, but I understand that like nomenclature around it. For all of that, they were incredibly affirming of all the things that I wanted to engage myself in that weren't in line with their experiences. So whatever weird camps I wanted to go to, or whatever weird books I was into, or art classes, or, any of that stuff.
Right.
So I'm really grateful for that.
That's cool. So what kind of factories were they in?
So
as workers?
My mom worked in a tool factory for about 17 years. She was a set builder at Vermont American in Lincolnton. Yeah. And, an amazing story. I remember being in high school, and by that time I knew that being an artistic and mathematically inclined kid set me up to be an architect, and that I could go into that and make my family proud. So I was taking a drafting class because that's all my small town high school offered, and that was kind of in line with an architectural direction.
Strapped with a T-square.
Strapped with a T-square, bro. Going up to the School of Technology, to the community college to take classes.
Oh, that's cool.
But in doing that, they were like, oh, let's take a trip to a factory to see how, like, you draft from a tool, like draft a tool and then see its full, like, manufacturing being created. And I walked into that factory and actually saw my mom on the set line. And it was this amazing feeling of pride, but also, like, shame. Just because my family definitely encouraged me to and wanted me to affect a way of living that wasn't anchored in working class mannerisms.
I see.
So I was always taught to carry myself in a way that I could govern myself amongst other classes of people, and that made them really proud that I was able to do that. But then in seeing what my mom endured for 17 years to support me and to keep a roof over my head and to put me into all the things I wanted to be in and all of that, it was kind of embarrassing that she had to do that, and she was doing it for me, but also pride that my mom is just beautiful and elegant and kind and obviously powerful, and she's doing it alongside all the women that I knew that she worked with, because they also like were on a bowling team together, funny enough. But
that's awesome.
It was a whole set of like boss women. But that was a really interesting, I only bring that up because of the whole like drafting into architecture thing, and then watching my mom on the set line as a factory worker.
So did you feel at all that, and forgive me, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but kind of like she wasn't practicing what she was preaching?
No, not that at all.
Because she was trying to get you to lead this different life, or was that just her being a great parent, like wanting a better life for her child?
Bingo, that's purely what it was.
Got it.
It was just seeing what she had to do and of course I understood she came home every evening for all of my childhood dirty and smelling like machinery. And you just, you're like a kid and you're like, oh, that's what mom does. And she comes home and she's tired and a bit cranky, but whatever.
Right.
But then in seeing it as, at that point, a young adult, because I'm 16 at this point, seeing what my 16, 36, 40-some-year-old mother is taking on to support me and to make sure that I have everything I need to excel, it was, it brought me to tears, like when I was by myself. Sure. I remember crying about it. Like I remember being a bit disillusioned, which is a healthy thing.
But you probably learned an immense work ethic due to that too, though, no?
Yeah, totally. From her and, from my dad, because...
Now, where was he? So
my parents by that point had... divorced, but dad had begun coaching at my high school. So football. He coached Little League football. So he coached my little league football and basketball, and then some during middle school as well. And by the time I got to high school, I was only playing basketball, not football. But he was coaching, and then I was watching him kind of navigate building a career in coaching, because he went from that to junior colleges as an assistant coach. Then went into minor league football, arena football, which was a minor league team that they only played on 50 yards as opposed to 100.
Oh, Raleigh
Durham Skyhawks. My dad coached for them.
They had, yeah.
Yeah, man, that was...
I used to date one of the dancers.
What? That's hilarious. Of
In
course
college.
you did, Wes. Of course you did. Dad coached for the Raleigh Durham Skyhawks.
The Skyhawks.
And then by the time I was graduating from high school, he was coaching at Clemson. And I think Clemson was the first D1 school that he took on. And from Clemson, he was at LSU.
So big places. I mean,
big places.
I mean, those are all just phenomenal organizations. I mean, completely. Clemson won the championship, even this year? I don't know. I don't watch college football anymore, but within the last 5 years, Clemson's won it, I believe. And then LSU, was that Les Miles' years?
Yes.
Head coach.
Yeah.
I mean, very well-known programs.
Yeah, I sound like a bad son because I can't pull up all those references.
No, it's all good.
He's a fashion designer, kids.
So you were playing sports. Your dad's now, or at this time, coaching big programs, moving around, obviously.
Exactly, and that was the breakdown of the family for the most part.
So how often did you go back and forth, or did you?
I didn't. So that actually is what namely brought about the divorce. His mom didn't want to move us around, and because he was at UTEP for a spell, University of Texas El Paso. I'm just remembering all the places that he was at, and so again, one of the things I'm grateful to her for, because she really put her foot down and knew this is what felt safest for her kids. And looking back, I can see how it would have been safest for me, and I'm grateful to her for that. But grateful to my dad, and grateful to them both for a myriad of reasons. But with Dad, just seeing the discipline that he displayed when building this career, and watching him do it from coaching my junior league football and basketball teams,
kind of working his way up the ladder.
Very much so, literally, to the extent that just last year he finally got his first professional job. He was coaching for Arizona Cardinals. He left after a year and went back to university. He's now at Appalachian State to be closer to family, to my grandmother and everything.
Another great program.
Exactly. But I'm incredibly proud of him for watching him on this ascent, and the dedication and just the perseverance that it takes to build something when there's not a reference point for you. So yeah, kudos to him for that.
And there's a lot to do with, business in that regard.
Business and negotiations and pivoting.
Yep.
Watching programs completely scrub the whole coaching staff, immediately, and then having to find another position, maintain a network so that you always have a warm lead for a position. And Dad is largely secured as a coach because of his recruiting capabilities. So again, it speaks to just being able to navigate relationships and people and all of that, and really casting vision to these boys, namely who he's recruiting. And he often recruits in very low income areas. That's become a bit of his specialty, particularly kids of color. So yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, man.
So that kind of takes us, through your formative years and then through high school. Then you went to NC State.
I did.
Which is getting us closer to how we met. But so what did you study at NC State?
I initially studied architecture, and once I got there, it felt quite, I don't know, I felt boxed in by it. And low key, I just didn't want to study that much history. So
That's funny.
But in my freshman year, fell in love with design fundamentals and materials in a way that I wasn't allowed to in high school because we just didn't have that extent of a program there. So then I fell in love with fabrics and took on an art and design degree and also a textile science degree.
Right.
So art and design, in that I could concentrate on the fine arts and really build up my artist process and feel free. And then textile science to just help secure me a job. Like if it didn't feel like the creative point of view or the creative professional route was going to be lucrative, I could pivot to textile chemistry and things of that nature. In the end, by my senior year, I brought them together. I'm grateful to my design and textile professors because they really helped and encouraged me bring it together. And I made my first clothes in my senior year using fabrics that I largely created. So some I wove, some I dyed. Yeah. So that program was amazing.
So I also went to North Carolina State, for those of you who don't know. So from that perspective, during those years, Centennial Campus, which is a kind of a minor, almost like a satellite campus off the main campus from that university, was really evolving and being developed during those years that you and I were there, especially. Tell everyone a little bit about why. Well, it's a famous program.
It is,
frankly.
It's
they develop fabrics for NASA, I think.
Yeah,
for the spacesuit.
The technology on that campus is, just it's ahead of everyone else. Fiber science, performance textiles, the fibrous makeup of a myriad of things is what we had to study while I was there. It's an amazing program, but it isn't a very creative program, particularly when I was there, because like you said, they were just building out the world-renowned nature of the program and of the campus. So, now it's far more world-renowned than it was then, even though it was still at the front end of the research that it was doing.
Yeah, I feel like it lend itself a little bit more towards the science side of the apparel industry, or at least fabrics.
Science and manufacturing, technology, that kind of thing. But that's why I'm grateful for my design background, because it's what allowed me to really kind of innocently and naively walk into this world of clothes making. So
that brings us to Banana Republic.
Banana
where we met
Republic.
Working. Crabtree Valley Mall. Shout out. So what do you remember from your time at Banana?
Wow.
What did you learn?
All the cuts of the chinos.
Oh man, I could fold some chinos like there's nobody's business.
Oh man. My time, Banana Republic then for us, I'll say for me, was the kind of aspirational way in which one would dress,
peak metrosexual years.
Peak.
I believe that
peak, bro.
That would have been a hashtag had hashtags existed.
Oh yeah,
because this is
fully.
What, 2000?
This is 2000. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're dating ourselves, but
jeez, man, this is 2000.
So
2001.
Peak metrosexual.
Peak, donning a colored chino. And, don't ask me my sexual preference, because I'm confident in who I am. A colored polo, a pop of color. I feel like the actual verbiage "pop of color" was born in those years.
All I can think of is just on a big sign, "Stretch Poplin."
Oh yeah, how tight. Oh, also guys showing their bodies in button downs because of that stretch poplin. So you can size down, because the darts in the back of the shirt.
Right.
It was a European fit. So the boys were feeling themselves, dude.
Yeah, those were interesting years to say the least. Even fashion wise, just And some of that stuff's, it kind of hasn't gone away.
Kind of has got it really, for me, it's like the birth of like what daggy dressing looks like now. Like anyone's gonna have a regular ass flat front chino, and like they're going out button down. Like every guy has that.
Right, the going out shirt.
The going out shirt, man.
Yeah, that's right. And they weren't as whimsical as, say, like Seven Diamonds.
Okay, yeah.
But yeah, definitely the going out shirt.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was kind of the foray into that.
Regular ass relaxed fit jeans, but then the going out shirt.
Right.
Ready for that date and a square toed shoe?
Square toe.
The squarest of toes.
Absolutely. So maybe a study in what not to do these days. So you mentioned growing up. What was coming out like for you?
It was
because I don't even know the story.
Yeah, well, it didn't happen until
how
graduating college.
Okay, so you're like 22 then.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay. I mean, I remember kissing a little boy for the first time in nursery school, in like the tubes, like on the it was in Kitty College, Lincoln, North Carolina. Shout out to Miss Betty. And I won't say his name.
No,
he's
please
now
don't.
Like a rebel flag waving, like
interesting
Republican, like
okay.
God. But
got it.
Anyway, we were playing, and I remember us just sitting there looking at each other, and then we kissed each other on the mouth and kept playing. And it just felt, I still remember it because it felt like, oh, that was cool. But then eventually I felt like, wait, do people not do that? Like, because I can remember being encouraged to like, ooh, like what little girls do you like? Or don't you want that to be your girlfriend? And all these kinds of things that, you know, how particularly then we would kid with kids.
Well, and in North Carolina.
And in North Carolina.
Bible Belt.
Exactly, all of that. And then also growing up Baptist, I would hear certain things in church just about, you know, kind of lascivious lives or, you know, the lives we aren't supposed to lead in order to be closer to God. And I can remember references to homosexuality. And though I knew I didn't know fully what that meant, I knew that the idea of two men particularly engaging in something intimate wasn't right. And so, and kids are really intuitive and really smart. And most of your time as a child is spent listening as opposed to talking. So you take in inordinate amounts of information. So I just remember taking it in and knowing early on that like, whoa, this is not cool. So it wasn't until university, graduating, that I traveled a lot by then. I spent a summer in New York. Wow, I just forgot about this. I spent a summer interning in New York, and I interned at Spade and at Michael Kors.
Yeah, sure.
And while I was there, my bosses were like handsome, metropolitan, well-spoken, intelligent, commanding, strong men. And then one by one, I figured out that most of them were gay. And it was an image of homosexuality outside of Will on Will and Grace, of someone who their version of homosexuality wasn't the campy version, although there's nothing wrong with that. It was just a version that was different and one that I related to. And I was like, oh, like these guys are everything. I want to be this wealthy. I want to be this handsome. I want to be this well-dressed, well-spoken, commanding. And they have partners, or they date men, and I remember at one point they would talk to me while I was in New York as if I too was gay. And then one day they asked me, they're like, wait, you are gay, right? And I was like, I'm bi. And I can remember it coming out of my mouth like, whoa, I just said I'm bi. Like,
as if that was a huge leap.
It was a huge leap.
Interesting.
I never engaged with a guy. Like, I never kissed a guy. I hugged. I mean, like outside of, you know, being 5 years old. I didn't have any of that in my experience. So I was literally just going off of this internal pull that I felt to certain images and certain people, and like how I would get chills and butterflies from like guys and not girls in the same way, even though I had girlfriends and would engage with them sexually, not intercourse, but it was just like, wow, like I think this is something I want to pay more attention to and take a look at. So anyway, after that, coming back to North Carolina to complete my senior year, and it was on the tail end of that, I came back, I broke up with my girlfriend by the end of the school year, and decided to take a post teaching English and studying Central Asian textiles in Uzbekistan. And I studied there one summer. The summer before New York, I studied in Turkmenistan. And then there was a job that I was going for at Jack Spade. They ended up not approving the new position. So when I didn't get that job, this opportunity was on the side, and I was just like, okay, I'll go away for a year. And it was the best decision I made, I think, in my entire life.
That's awesome. Well, what about that experience was phenomenal? I mean, obviously getting outside of anybody's element, right? Or of your own element, rather. Anyone getting outside of their own element is a phenomenal way to learn, right?
An amazing one. And you look at everything when you are outside of your kind of mother context. Like everything is up for consideration.
I know it sounds funny, but when I graduated college, I traveled around Europe by myself. And I know this is a horrible thing for me to say, but it was the first time in my life where I really, truly, and this is almost wrongful, but where I felt like a minority.
I hear that.
And that was really just due to, language barriers in certain cases. And then
That's
just culturally, right? So
yeah.
It wasn't racially, obviously, necessarily, and I think that you grow from that. And especially me, middle class, white guy from North Carolina, never really had to want for anything, very fortunate. And especially for like today's climate, but back in say 2002, you're really learning a lot, taking myself out of that element. So going back to you, obviously, no question that you experienced something similar.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, being in the third world, a former communist country, still grappling with that,
right,
and wanting to engage with the like the indigenous culture there, for lack of a better word. So not wanting to be in Tashkent, in the capital city, and learning Russian, but wanting to be in Samarkand or in the villages outside of Samarkand, in Bukhara, learning Uzbek, engaging with Uzbek students, Uzbek families, learning more about Uzbek culture and particularly the textiles of the region. And it was just, in doing so as, at that point, a 5'11" black American guy, it was a whole clusterfuck for them and for me, but in an amazing way. And I can remember my mom sending me some magazines just to kind of
stay in touch.
Exactly.
Right.
And one of them was like this fashion magazine I'd subscribed to, and she'd gotten some of the magazines at our home and sent those to me. And I just longed to be operative in this craft of fashion design. Just seeing the images, I just longed for it. And those longings that I experienced while in Uzbekistan, I know they still kind of are a bit of they govern the direction that I go today. It was clothing, it was beautiful images, it was, frankly speaking, beautiful men. It was like all of these things. I was like, wow, like this is who I am, right? Because I was removed from not anything, that's not true. I was removed from so many culture comforts and culture kind of knowledge, right? So then everything that I was presented with, I wasn't responding to it from muscle memory, right? Like what did I really want? Did I really want, what was I longing for a fry, or was I longing for like a burger or a pizza? Like there are certain things that just end up coming to the surface, and those things came to the surface. So I left there after a year and went to New York.
And that's where you started with who?
That's where I started. I went back to school and went to Parsons.
That's right. Parsons.
Yep.
I meant to ask you, like, how did that even enter the picture? Was that because you were looking for jobs and couldn't find one, or you felt there was like a void in your resume, or
Bingo,
what?
both.
Okay.
Both. I knew that I would be more I'd
marketable.
Marketable, yeah, with Parsons on my resume, and I just wanted to be better. My sketching skills were amazing, and I already knew that from both of the companies and the directors that I'd worked for, who were amazing to me. But neither of those collections were approving a new assistant position, and no one was leaving. So I decided, okay, I'll go to grad school, and I will continue interning there at both collections. And I did, and I'm really grateful that I did. But after leaving Parsons, which was amazing because of the relationships I built. And
I'm sure the networking's insane.
The networking, I mean, it wasn't insane. But just having something, it helped a country boy from North Carolina safely enter and feel like he could have his footing in this, super metropolitan city.
And the industry.
And the industry. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, but after Parsons, I actually took a job designing home textiles for Bloomingdale's private label.
Interesting.
Because all the fashion jobs I was finding were not paying a living wage. I did not have a trust fund like so many of the other entering fashion designers into the industry. So I decided to go back to, one would say, my first love, and that's fabric. And they paid me a living wage. And I was with them for 2 years before I got a job at Michael Kors in collection.
So what did you learn from the Bloomingdale's role that maybe you even still use today?
That's a good question.
Or was it just more of the same, with fabrics and such?
No, I mean, it was not more of the same, because I did learn in a bit of a safer space how to create more modern product, because many of the applications and fabrics that I was engaging myself with in North Carolina was based on something traditional, because that is that's the aesthetic dialogue of North Carolina. So it wasn't always as modern as I would have loved it to have been. And I affected modernity, thank God for Banana Republic, but also just the extent of research that I would do.
Yeah.
But still being at, 11 Penn Plaza, it was a safe place to navigate new references. And they were all quite loving to me because they really saw my talent, but I was very young for the office. I learned how to engage myself in a corporate environment. It helped me understand work politics and the art of negotiations and things like that in less of a high-paced atmosphere, so that when I did make the shift to high fashion, because I went from that to runway collection stuff, I was a bit more well-versed and prepared to self-protect, because fashion is volatile oftentimes in the work environments.
Hey guys, I just wanted to take a moment and thank you for listening. Also, if you could rate the podcast, it only takes a couple seconds. It really helps with the search function and other people finding the podcast. In addition to that, go to the website, standard-h.com. There you can sign up for our email list. I randomly send out special offers that are exclusive to email subscribers, so you may want to take part in that. While you're on the site, another great way to support us is to visit the online shop, obviously, where you can pick up a hat, t-shirt, even a pair of our shorts, which actually have an amazing fit and happen to be on sale currently. In addition to that, you can save an additional 20% off your total purchase with the code PODCAST at checkout. I really can't do this without your help, and I sincerely thank you again for listening. Really appreciate all the support and all the feedback everyone has been giving me. It really does make me feel like $1,000,000, so thank you for that. Let's get back to my conversation with Charles. What were some of the designers that you sort of looked up to as you were going through either college or Parsons, for example?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously you worked for Michael Kors.
Yeah, I loved Michael's work. But when I look historically, it was always Yves Saint Laurent, Jeffrey Bean.
Now Yves Saint Laurent, the man and the brand,
and
as
then
opposed
at
to
the
Tom
brand
Ford,
at the time.
right?
Yeah,
because your background's Tom Ford's background, right? Architecture followed by fashion.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
yeah,
but you're talking the man.
Yeah,
YSL.
Definitely the man and the brand. I think by that point, Stefano Pilati was designing Yves Saint Laurent, and I really connected to that as well. Also, the smoking and the kind of feminist nature of his clothes always linked with me because my mom was a pantsuit wearing woman. So that imagery was always one of like beauty for me. So the women in my family definitely navigated in pantsuits and in pants, and they were working women, so they were sporty, and I remember my mom playing softball when I was young. So I just related to how Yves approached women's wear in that sense, and then also the kind of ethnic references that he had no problem bringing into the collections as I did research, and I loved it. Jeffrey Bean, Michael Kors, who else did I particularly? I do remember loving Stephen Burrows because I made it a point to research like black designers, so I'd have some frame of reference for that because obviously everywhere I went into there was a dearth of that identity, and I was black, so I wanted to know who the fuck came before.
Right, sure.
But the sense of joie de vivre and color in Stephen's work, the imagery, all of that really resonated with me. Yeah. Those, I'm sure
that's a healthy mix.
Yeah, which is why my collection has a healthy mix of it too, you know?
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good transition because obviously Harbison was born in New York City.
It was.
Currently we're in Los Angeles. So take us through a little bit of what launching Harbison was like early days. Like,
yeah.
Was there a particular moment that you were just like, my God, like I have to start my own brand?
Yeah, dude. It was definitely that.
What day was that? Not literally on the calendar. Right?
Well, there was a bit of a day because I'd worked by that point for, I guess, 7 years in New York. So I'd been from Bloomingdale's to Kors to Luca Luca to Billy Reid, and
you launched Billy's women's wear.
I did. That was my first director post. I'm really still incredibly grateful to him for entrusting that to me at like 29. But yeah, he, after that was over, they, the numbers weren't what they wanted them to be, and so they let me go. And while on severance, my then boyfriend and I decided to travel to the Virgin Islands to see my best friend Kelly. She was living there with her husband. She's a physician's assistant. So we were there, and I took Just Kids with me, the Patti Smith book about her relationship with Robert Mapplethorpe. And I took it because I was a bit of a hipster in New York. I was a Brooklyn boy. I lived in Brooklyn the entire 11 years I was in New York. So I was reading it and just fell in love with these two individuals. Like, I had researched the images and knew visually they were like beautiful. Robert was, he's a key image maker of queer art. Patti, I really only knew through the filter of Because the Night, her key song.
Sure.
But after reading that book, I just fell in love with the two of them and fell in love with how they arguably took on characteristics of the opposing gender. Patty was the more confident, initiative of the two, a bit rough around the edges, and Robert was the fragile, seemingly more emotional of the two. And we think characteristically of the man and the woman having different, fulfilling a different role than that. And so the beauty of their relationship really intrigued me and excited me. And by that point, I had established myself as a guy who had no problem wearing like women's clothes as a man in the world. Like if I wanted a long cardigan, or I wanted a coat that had, you know, a nipped in shoulder, a nipped in waist, or I wanted a shirt that wasn't a shirt, it was more of a blouse. I really opted into those aesthetics and didn't really see it as anything more than finding the pieces that I wanted, that weren't being offered on the men's rack. But when I read about these two, I was like, wow, like this is a thing. Like this is beautiful, these archetypes. And I was like, I want to make these clothes. Like no one's making clothes in the way that I wear them, in the way that I want them. And no one's making clothes that tell my story. So I came back, wrote a business plan, came back from the Virgin Islands to New York, wrote a business plan, and sought money, just some beginning money, and went to my dad. And my dad gave me my first few thousand to make some samples. And I'm still so grateful to him for that. And just my life savings that I built at that point, and on unemployment, started making samples, and really thought in the end, you know what, maybe this will be a refresher for my portfolio. Maybe this will help me find another job and take that next step, because I was at a director position at that point and really felt like I needed to show more to a potential employer. So I was like, I will just make these samples. I'll shoot them. A stylist friend introduced me to this photographer, Dan Dealey, who I still love today, who at the end shot several lookbooks for me, almost all my lookbooks for Harbison in the time that I was in New York. And shot the images and decided, oh, this is beautiful. Like I will show a few people just to get their take on it. And I said all that to say, all of this is really born out of the network that I built over all those years of working. So Catherine Neal Schaefer, who is Sam Schaefer's wife, Anna Wintour's daughter-in-law, she was my stylist at Luca Luca. She also presented me to Billy Reid for that post. And I was like, oh, she was like, what are you up to now? I was like, oh, I made some clothes and shot some images. She's like, well, send it over to me. I was like, okay, no big deal. Send it over to her. And she said, Charles, these are really good. I was like, okay. I mean,
well, they are.
I mean, yeah, I love them.
Yeah. And
I still navigated the industry like the kind of nerdy boy from North Carolina. Like I still had a bit of a lack of confidence as a result of that, those identities, right? And fashion beats you up. So I wasn't sure, right? And I just decided to not make a big deal of it until she did. And she's like, you need to come to Vogue. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, whoa. I was like, this is not a thing. Like, no one's bought these. Like, this isn't a thing. She's like, you need to come. I was like, okay.
What did she mean by that? You need to come to Vogue. Obviously not to work there.
No, but she also, I didn't say this, she had a stylist post at Vogue as well. So she would style independently, but she also was like an editor, a stylist in residence at Vogue. She's Anna Wintour's daughter-in-law. So she's mentioned this to me. At the same time, I had been eating at Aurora. I still remember this, in Soho, close to the West Side Highway. And Patrick Robinson walked by the window one day. Patrick is an amazing fashion designer, black guy. He's had posts at Paco Rabanne, Armani, Gap, Pirellis.
And these are creative director roles.
Exactly, yes.
Not just design roles.
Exactly, thank you. And Patrick was always, I love his work. I also loved how he presented himself in the industry. So I saw him, I ran out, and I was like, hey, Patrick, like, I really look up to you. I'd love to have coffee or something one day. And he was really cool about it. He was like, okay. So I remember riding my bike from Bushwick all the way back to, I can't remember what restaurant in Soho, a few days later, and talking to him. And then he was like, so, what are you doing in the midst of between jobs, all this kind of stuff? And I was like, well, I made some clothes and shot some images. And he's like, send them over to me. I was like, okay. So I sent him over to him, and he's like, Charles, these are really good. I want to show my wife, Virginia Smith. Virginia is the European market and accessories director at Vogue. So both these individuals see my clothes and want to refer me to Vogue, and I don't even know what that means.
Now, this is the same American Vogue.
This is the same American
right,
Vogue,
so
yes.
Not
your American Vogue. I still don't even know what that means. Like, I've just been working in studios for 7-8 years. I didn't know, okay, like, what does that even mean? And so both Virginia Smith and Mark Holgate received my lookbook by way of Catherine Neal Schaefer. So then they're like, come to Vogue with the collection. We would love to see it. And I arrive. And they're like, these are great. And I'm just like...
So, well, right. I mean, I'm sure you were floored, but...
I mean, not only floored, just like wondering what is happening.
Like, do you belong there kind of thing?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like, I live in a 4th floor walk-up in Bushwick.
It was cool, though. That was a cool apartment.
Shout out to that apartment. Thank you, homie.
So, real quick, though, describe your first collection. What pieces were a part of it?
So the key muses were Patty and Robert. And my themes were Bauhaus and sport. Bauhaus because the modernist movement was the key design process that I learned in undergrad. It still is so close to me. Form over function is really, I think, a beautiful concept. And cleanliness and thoughtfulness, discipline in design, all of those things I love.
Lots of repetition, right?
Exactly. Repetition,
Shapes.
The beauty of repetition,
yep.
And systems, all of those sorts of things. So that and sport, just because I definitely wanted to infuse my love of outerwear with something active in the world. So those were the key themes. I guess key pieces from the collection were a color block coat, some gender neutral outerwear, a gender neutral moto jacket, and some bold colored suiting. So those were the key things. A few other color block pieces. But I took the collection to Vogue, and they were incredibly supportive. And they're like, Charles, we'd love to write a story about you. I was like, okay. I was like, but I don't have any stores. I remember saying this to them. like
I have zero distribution.
I have zero and they're like, we'll help you with that. And I was just like, okay, thank you. And I still don't even know what any of this means. I've never had a business, started a business, navigated the kind of financial tier of a fashion business. I'd never really been in a sales meeting.
So these were just samples.
These were just one-off samples.
Everything made there in New York City.
Everything made in
Garment
New York City.
District.
Garment District, yeah. Using makers that I'm so grateful for that I had worked with at different posts.
What were some of the fabrics you used? Was it wool? Was it cotton?
The key outerwear, there was a double-faced wool Melton, which is like a nice sturdy, almost felted outerwear wool, in charcoal, in fireman red, and in a deep emerald green, and also a caramel, a melange caramel. The moto was in a nice buffalo leather, in black, but then also a beautiful, really, really super deep, almost black green that did quite well. The suiting was in a tropical way wool, really quite flat. I didn't really want anything with texture. because I wanted it to just be about the color, and really found this really beautiful statement red. And then we also did a wool felt cap in a few colors. And then the shirting was in a silk cotton. By that point, most of the brands, actually that's not true, all of the brands that I designed for had a love for and a brand rooted in luxury fabrics. And they were by and large all natural fiber. And so that dialogue I brought into this collection, and I still have an affinity, a strong affinity for natural fibers for a myriad of reasons. But yeah, those were some of the fabrics.
Let's talk a little bit about the structure of the business from the get-go. I mean, obviously you were kind of a one-man band initially. What year was this? 2013? 12?
Yes, 13.
13.
Yep.
Okay. It's almost 6 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens next? You go to Vogue. They want to write a story about you.
Yes, I have no distribution. They say, we want to help you get some stores. We just need to see a little more product because it was still a few samples. So then I went back into my piggy bank and dug even deeper and basically cleared it all out to create an additional round of pieces. And then I had an independent presentation in April. So literally 6 years ago. Because at this point, I showed them the collection, I think, in March. It was after Paris Fashion Week when they'd come back. And then about 4 to 6 weeks after that meeting, I had a presentation. They came to the presentation. It was held at an art gallery in Chelsea. A friend and who I wanted to be my business partner, but fortunately for her, unfortunately for me, she decided to build out her family, and so we ended up not working together. But she helped me find an art gallery to show the work. Showed it really independently. Friends modeled, some kind of lower level agencies offered me models who are all amazingly lovely. It was manned by my friends.
No, this was just a presentation, right?
Exactly.
So for many people, most folks out there feel like fashion is all about a runway and fashion shows.
Not at all.
A lot of independents, right? They do these presentations where models literally just stand still.
Exactly.
And some on boxes to be taller than others and such. That collection, the subsequent pieces that you went back into your piggy bank for whatever reason, I just remember these almost Mondrian-like color blocking. It's yellow, red, blue, kind of like cobalt.
Yep.
With like black. Was it Mondrian?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, definitely.
That was the inspiration.
Yeah, I'm always I often don't even drop those names because I'm always drawing from modernist painters and artists, particularly those who color block, from Joseph Albers and Bryce Martin to Mondrian, and you know, furniture designers like Corbusier and if one would want to call Brancusi a modernist. But yeah, that is my wheelhouse. That's where I feel most confident in color. I don't allow myself to stay there because I have to push and challenge myself. And I've definitely over the years established a dialogue for pastels and off colors and things of that nature. And I still love those. But in those days, it was very rooted in that palette.
Cool. Pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
And so what was the reception like?
It was great. Vogue sent representatives to the presentation. It was about I think we were there 3 hours, maybe 2.5 hours.
Was that Milk Studios? Where were you?
It was in an art gallery in Chelsea.
Oh, an art gallery. You said that. I'm sorry.
This is before Made and sponsorships and everything. This is just me, not on any Fashion Week calendar. It's literally me doing this just to present more work to what ended up being my marquee supporters, particularly in the beginning of the business. Made invitations, all utilizing my friends, all of it. And I'm so, each one of y'all have such a humongous place in my heart because of those years, particularly those beginning years of Harbison, where everything was rooted in gifted labor from my friends. But yeah, it was well received. Soon after that, I got my first stockist, which was Ecrom in Chicago, and Vogue secured me for their September issue and wrote an article. It was my first article ever, and it basically announced me to the world.
In their biggest issue.
Biggest issue of the year.
The year.
Yeah, I'm still, Jennifer Lawrence was on the cover. I still love that image. It was myself and
I have it on my bookshelf.
that's my boy. It was me and was it Suju Park?
I mean, no offense, but I couldn't tell you who else is in that magazine other than you.
Dude, that image is still like, she was in the color block coat with me and I was in the black moto, and it was a magical day. I had no idea that I'd be in the image. I thought I was just bringing samples to the shoot, and then they're like, "So you ready to go?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" They're like, "Charles, you're in the image," and I was like, "I don't have anything to wear." So we're already all the way at the pier, so I had to go all the way to Bushwick. I think I probably dropped an inordinate amount of money on a cab just to get over there, and I had no money these days, so I was basically like cleaning out the account to do
Just
this.
figure it out later.
Yo, bro, figure it out later, and went and brought the moto jacket and the jean and came back to the shoot, and they plopped me right down. I remember having a sty on my eye, a really bad one, because I was really overworking myself in those days and quite stressed and alone. I was single, so I had this massive sty on my eye, and luckily I have some frames, and I was like, okay, well, guys, I have this sty. They're like, don't worry about it, we'll figure it out. And so they shot me at an angle so that the sty was off camera. But yeah, even on my Instagram, I still have a video of myself talking about that day, and with a massive red sty on one of my eyes, just by way of all the stress I was enduring, but still so grateful.
Sure.
So grateful, man.
God, I can't imagine that.
Yeah.
So the sty, that's news to me.
Yeah, that damn sty, man. But yeah, Ecrom, my first stockist.
So for those who don't know Ecrom, what other lines do they carry, just so they know the magnitude?
From like Yoji Yamamoto and Comme des Garçons all the way up to Saint Laurent and Balmain, and just every marquee designer on the planet. Ecrom is a beautiful store in Chicago, and she herself is an amazing woman, and I'm forever grateful to her.
So first article, September issue of Vogue.
Yes.
First stockist, Ecrom in Chicago.
And Satine in LA, I must say.
And Satine, right.
God rest its soul.
Yeah.
Those are my first two. And then the issue came out in September. Fashion Week was in August. And on the heels of the September issue coming out, this still wasn't Made Fashion Week. No, a PR agency and a showroom reached out to me and offered me support, just on a kind of a benevolent package. And I then showed kind of a larger collection on the calendar, or day 0 of Fashion Week, that September. Yeah. And it was what I think is one of the most beautiful collections I've done. I worked feverishly through the summer to pull it out, and kind of ate up the end of my budget, but found my first investor during that time as well, which I'm incredibly grateful for still.
So let me interrupt you just for one second, because my next question was going to be about fundraising and raising money. Fashion, the epitome of a revolving door of money.
It's insane.
Talk to us, walk us through, what is that process like, seeking out funding, the proverbial handout, if you will, for the lack of a better description.
Yeah. It's different for everyone, and it has a lot to do with what your network looks like. And for me, being a country boy, grew up working class, poor, I didn't come with a Rolodex of wealth, familial wealth at all that I could speak to. Thankfully, my dad had those initial few thousands that he believed in me in the beginning to give me, but that's really it. And honestly, in those days, things were so tight. Like some months, my parents were having to like scrounge and find money to pay my rent, and friends were feeding me at times, like it was really incredibly hard.
Right.
But what I did have the good sense to do was I loved what was happening so much. And I was so grateful that it was happening that it really cut so much of my ego to where I remember writing this massive email to all y'all. Like, this is really turning into something significant. I had done research to figure out terms and just basically sent it out to all my friends saying, if you knew someone who would be open to have a conversation with me, I'd be super grateful. And then my friend Victor, who he and I weren't close at all, but Victor was a part of the art world, and so he knew what this was like. And he connected me to my first investment opportunity, and I got it over the line. And I just, but that kind of monopolized my time for a few months. And I didn't have any money to make another collection. I didn't have any money to ship production for the orders that were secured from Satine and Ikram. So there's all these things that summer that I needed to figure out. And
so that injection of capital did those things.
Bingo, exactly. It did those things, and it started me on what became a very vicious cycle for me, and one that I wanted to opt out of as soon as possible.
Right.
Not from the making of clothes, but just the cash flow aspect of having a wholesale-based business in fashion. It's one of investing large amounts of money at every stage, and the capital investment is from the brand, whether from sampling, then to the sales process, and procuring those sales, and the investment in sales materials, in a salesperson, sales space. So not just the samples, but then that photography, the touting of orders, and then when and if those orders come in, then the capital to produce orders, because by and large, you're not going to receive a deposit as a startup brand. Right. So then you're then investing in making clothes that you will then get paid from on terms. And particularly in those days, stores weren't holding well to their terms.
And if you were lucky, it was net 30.
Meaning
30 days, the store has 30 days to write that check to you. So you're
after they receive the product.
Yeah. And they could have even sold it hypothetically.
Yeah, exactly.
Within the 30 days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or even some of the terms were set up to where if they didn't sell it, they returned it to you. So you were really, unless you hit it really hard and really big in the beginning, you were always going to be in the red. And fashion businesses of like magnanimous size have gone tens of years without turning a profit because of this kind of structure. And then eventually, I think, I don't want to fully go on the record saying this, but I'll, whatever. There's a key brand that I know of that the designer is a celebrity or a celebrity child, and it took 10 years for them to turn a profit. Sure. And they're a brand that we all know and it rolls off of our tongues. So walking into that as a newbie and really, not having a fashion business background, really not having a lot of that in my schooling because it was so creative focused. It was incredibly stress-inducing and at times debilitating. But again, what was stronger than that fear and stronger than that stress was my undying love for what I did.
I think the interesting thing is not turning a profit, for example, happens in the tech industry all the time.
all the time.
And I don't know about you, but I feel like it's not even talked about. The only one that I ever in recent memory is Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
But that's only because they're worth a gajillion dollars now.
Mm-hmm.
So, oh, well, that was just off the cuff. Yeah, we weren't even profitable. Ha 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 ha.
Exactly.
You know, it's almost like the good old days.
Mm-hmm.
And
people throw crazy amounts of cash at tech businesses.
Yeah.
And the percentage is crazy. Like, it's so low for the number of tech businesses that actually make it.
High risk, high reward. Yeah, I mean, that's what you're banking on, right?
But there's so many losers out there.
But I guess you could say the same for fashion, too. You know, I mean, it is high risk.
You can.
And it can be high reward.
Yes, it can be.
So, yeah, you know, it was just something that came to mind just now, just thinking about that.
But to your point, the high reward nature of fashion now is so different from what it was 5-10 years ago. And that's the amazing thing about fashion, is it's so evolving and it's so respondent to culture, that the way in which one would build a fashion business today is not at all like I began to do it just 6 years ago.
All right, so we were going to talk about this later. So
Okay.
let's wrap about it now.
Okay.
So just expand on what you were saying.
Well,
Like, how would you do it now?
How would I do it now? I mean, I definitely don't look back at that boy and think that he did anything wrong. Like, he did the absolute best that he could with the resources he was given. And I do think that boy was quite ingenious. And I really love and respect him. So much so that I do talk about him in the third person. Because I'm not that same guy.
Right. We
today.
evolve. Sure.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's fair.
But there is the direct to consumer market today is just so well oiled, and it was definitely not then being able to create a product, market it directly to a consumer online, hold inventory, ship directly, all the mechanisms to do that well, even from how to build the website, even the fulfillment aspects, the payment aspects. All of these things are so automated now.
Yeah, you get money immediately. It's in your account the next day.
It's in your account the next day. And I've seen brands build amazing businesses far more quickly because of that. Granted, many of them skimp on quality and things of that nature because there's not the oversight of a store, right? Because a store is a bit of a filter right there. You do have accountability to deliver a certain caliber of product. Because that filter and that liaise to customers in there, like you do see some brands delivering shitty stuff. And eventually, yes, like the customer becomes privy to that, they stop buying, and then there's a downturn. But as far as hitting the market immediately and getting some cash in your pocket, all the means by which someone can independently advertise on all forms of social media, and there are so many, just well utilized social media platforms. And then, I'm also part of an influencer marketing tech platform called Sponsors One, and we are helping to encourage the direct-to-consumer route by incentivizing micro-influencers. But even just that verbiage, that phrase is not something that would have been said 6 years ago.
It didn't exist.
There was not a thing. So there's just so many, and I'm touting startups now to bring them onto that platform, and it's a key platform for Harbison's next steps here in Los Angeles. But you can utilize all those things, right? And then the nature of celebrity styling it's a world that is, so accessible now. You can just DM so many stylists who, style different celebrities. And so the path to getting your product on a key individual is seemingly easier if your product is stellar. But it's all these access points that before the access point was the industry. Now the access point is either the industry, i.e. the fashion industry, or it's social media.
This episode is brought to you by Passion Fine Jewelry in Solana Beach, California. Tim and Jana Jackson own a really great store that carries tons of independent watches Very haute horology, very high end. The finishing on the movements of these types of brands are absolutely second to none. Incredible works of art. They also have fine jewelry, as the name would imply. Tim is GIA certified. They also have a goldsmith on staff there in the store. So they could pretty much help you out in a multitude of ways for your jewelry and watch needs. So check them out, passionfinejewelry.com, as well as Tim's blog, independentintime.com, for just a wide range of information that you can get there. Thanks so much again for listening, and back to the conversation. So as somebody who's dressed Beyonce...
That happened a few times.
What was that like? How did that come up?
That was
this is
magical.
prior to Instagram, right?
Yeah, well,
So
in the midst of Instagram, yeah. It was stellar. It was amazing. It saved my business one year. I'm so grateful to Zarina Akers. Zarina is one of Beyonce's key stylists, and she saw the collection by way of Peju Formagere, who is an amazing woman who interviewed me for Italian Vogue and did an amazing video with me. I'm grateful to her. Zarina saw my work and then commissioned some styles custom for Beyonce. And I do remember her emailing, and of course, like, we all freaked out. And then we're like, oh, but wait, we don't have any money. So at the time, I had a brand director, and I told her, I was like, and again, it was a friend who was donating her time for the benefit of the business, and also hoping to help us get our legs so that she could come on full time. But emailed her, and I said, email her and say, we love this opportunity, but unfortunately we're not able to gift to anyone, but thank you so much. Beyonce is a muse and a key point of inspiration for us, all this kind of shit, right? And of course Zarina writes back like, oh, we're going to pay for it. And then of course our minds were blown, because we'd been so kind of, for lack of a better word, I don't know, business raped by way of all the people loaning or wanting to, borrow clothes and returning them messed up. And the world of loaning is just so horrible for young brands. And then Beyonce comes in and spends thousands of dollars on several custom looks.
Hold up. Pump the brakes.
Yeah.
You were willing to turn this down just due to the lack of funds, obviously, which literally you wouldn't be able to make the clothes for her.
I couldn't do it. And
So I can't imagine what hitting the send button must have felt like.
Heartbreaking.
Knowing that this was the opportunity of a lifetime.
Yeah, it's just, but I couldn't even, it was like getting blood out of a turnip, man. Like, I had nothing to give.
So what did you do? Did they prepay for it?
Yes.
Oh, no kidding.
Yes, she prepaid several looks because they needed to be to her measurements. So these were custom looks for her. So they weren't bespoke, right? Because you didn't measure her. No, but they
were custom pieces.
Yeah, they sent measurements. They sent her measurements. So for the most part, they were bespoke. I wasn't able to fit them on her body, but they were made to her measurements.
I don't want to know how much, but do you charge a premium for something like that for Beyonce?
We didn't.
Or were they retail prices?
The thing for us, being that we manufactured in New York, it was always at a premium, right? And so, of course, this wasn't coming off of a volume order. These are just one-offs. So it's a single pattern to a single sample, and it was already going to be absurdly expensive. So we didn't pad it, and we didn't make any money off of it. The only goal for us was to make sure that we got the most beautiful product to this woman that we could.
And I'm sorry, were you using fabrics that you had used before?
Yes, yeah. Yeah, we were using collection fabrics. Some of them we'd used up in our sampling, and we hadn't yet cut production. So we had to do some over-the-counter sourcing for some of the fabrics. But the key fabrics we had on hand from the collection sampling.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and so that was the first time she wore it was her first time attending the Yeezy show, the Kanye Yeezy show. And it was the first day of Fashion Week. I was showing, I think, day 4, and all we just wanted to get the product out to her. We were in the midst of also designing a new collection, so we had to like kind of push it in to get it done. Got it done, delivered it to her, and really I didn't think anything else about it. I was like, I maybe should wear it to I don't know,
like a basketball game.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so I had no idea. I was just like, I just wanted to have it. I wanted it to be perfect. And when it happened, I was pleased. And then all of a sudden, at lunch, Zarina texts me and she's like, she's wearing you to the Kanye show. And I saw the text and I was like, oh, that's so great. It still didn't like resonate. It didn't hit me because I was already just so overwhelmed with everything going on.
You're so stressed, I'm sure.
So incredibly stressed. And I was just like, oh, that's so great. She's wearing it tonight. No, she didn't say she was wearing it to the Kanye show. She said, Beyonce is in Harbison tonight.
Oh,
that's
yeah.
all
Okay,
she said. And I was like, oh, she's going to dinner. Maybe she's going to wear the 2-piece pink number or something at dinner. Like, I hope they get pictures. I'm just happy it's on her body. And then before I know it, there are all these like texts and images and then stuff on Twitter of her like in my clothes. And I was like, what? And then side by side, like people figured out whose it was, and it just kept happening and going. And then she had the fur bag with her, and then her images of Kim and Kanye's daughter. Wow. North.
Okay.
North petting the bag.
I couldn't remember if North was a boy or a girl, to be
all this stuff
completely honest with you.
North petting the bag. Beyonce sitting beside Anna Wintour. Full Harbison bustier, Harbison skirt, Harbison coat, and Harbison fur bag. And it just kept going. And I'm so grateful to Zarina for that. And then she wore us on the fight night. Or
I'm sure it's a Mayweather fight.
Yeah, it was Mayweather.
Yeah.
And Pacquiao.
Okay.
She wore us fight night, and then she wore us to a wedding. Then she wore us on Instagram. And then in the midst of all of this, her sister Solange also wore Harbison at Paris Fashion Week, and she wore the coat that her sister wore. So then they had side by sides of like Beyonce and Solange sharing the coat. Although Beyonce wore a custom coat, Solange wore my sample.
Got you.
But both of those women, my apologies, are just central for me, for like walking muses, and I'm so grateful to them caring and loving the collection enough to really wear it in such amazing ways. Particularly in just a couple years span before I came to LA.
It would seem like you were just living the jet set life after this. But obviously fashion being fashion, you've already alluded to it. It beats you down.
Oh, come on, man. I remember once my lights being cut off in my apartment because I'd paid my studio rent and not the utilities in my apartment. And so I had to spend the night, my ex-boyfriend and I, in the studio on like, it was just like a one room studio. There wasn't a bathroom or anything. We just slept on like this carpet. We had these carpets that we would use at the presentations. And we had one in the office and we rolled it out on the floor and slept there that night because the lights were cut off at home. Real shit like that was happening in the midst of these amazing things. I was at the White House during the same time.
That's right. I totally forgot about that.
That happened, which was amazing. I spoke on a fashion entrepreneurship panel at the First Lady Michelle Obama's fashion education workshop, which was an amazing experience. She's amazing. It just, all of these things were happening. Amazing editorials, but cash and holding up the business
was
next to impossible.
So one thing I ask everybody is, and I feel like I already know the answer at this point, but what's the hardest part about running your own business for you, for Harbison? Be it at the beginning, the middle, now. What's been the hardest thing thus far?
The hardest thing is something not concrete. For me, it's the feeling of loneliness.
In the business.
In the business.
What do you mean by that?
It's such a particular entrepreneurial pursuit. There's so many skills that you need to have leading up to that point. So there's such a small pool of people that can relate to what you're doing. And it is a business based on so much kind of mystique. And there's a lack of transparency because, like fashion is largely about selling the dream.
Ego as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it just sets you up to really in those dark times feel quite lonely. At least it did for me.
That's interesting.
Solitude I appreciate. Singularity I love. But the loneliness, particularly when things got really hard and you're just trying to figure out what's next. And oftentimes a lot of people can't, even the people with the best of intentions and also with the longest resumes and the most experience, can't advise you because fashion entrepreneurship is a thing unto itself.
That's really interesting, and that is nowhere near what I thought you were going to say. Frankly, I just thought it was just going to be money related, just based on the previous statements. But what's been the easiest thing? And I mean, it could be anything. What do you find easy?
Designing.
Yeah,
I love what I love. I know what I love. I know what I like.
It's not work.
It's not,
it's
man.
Fun.
It's fun. It's a dream. Of course, there's work in the midst of it. There are things that I have to do that are laborious and sometimes exhausting, but by and large, designing, I look forward to doing it until I die because I love it so much.
That's awesome. So what kind of advice would you give anybody else? I mean, aside from definitely go direct to consumer these days versus trying to get in the pages of Vogue, what kind of bits of advice would you give somebody trying to launch a brand today?
Have a great product.
What do you think constitutes what makes a good product, first of all?
I would say work backward from the things you want your product to do. So, let's say in fashion, it's boxer shorts. What is it you want your customer to experience? Oh, I want them to feel comfortable. Okay, what kind of comfort? I want a comfortable waistband, and I want a fit that is snug but not too tight. Okay, why? Because I don't think there's a lot of those in the market right now, and I can't find one for myself. Okay, cool. So then what materials are going to bring about that experience for the customer and bring about that fit in the boxer? And before you know it, so many of your answers will be, so many of your questions rather will be answered. And then on top of that kind of functional nature, then you can begin to kind of work with the aesthetics. But I think it's important to think about a customer's experience and think about the functionality of a garment and think about creating something well. Like, do what you do and do it exceedingly well. And that's a piece of advice that many people have heard out of my mouth.
I think that's good life advice almost. Do what you like and do it well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but
or just from a work ethic standpoint.
Exactly.
Anyway.
But in the midst of capitalism, particularly how it's been rendered today, like it's just oftentimes just about like do something, right? And
look busy,
make money on a thing. But I still just believe not only personal responsibility, but ecological responsibility. We are making things that are needed. We are making things that are bringing about the demise of our planet. Like, we can't mince words when it comes to that. So at the very least, if you are putting it into the world, make sure that you are making it as well as you possibly can at whatever price point. And be thoughtful,
So what advice do you give? Because pricing is it's a fickle piece of information for people. It's a touch point of sensitivity. Not everybody's
God,
rich,
yeah.
obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But even from a manufacturing standpoint, what role does price play for you? Do you design around price? Do you even contemplate price?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
definitely.
How so?
I try to not relegate it to the collection at large. I need those pieces and those categories that are a space where I get to affect the most beautiful thing, regardless of price, that I can. And then there are other categories in the collection that I know are spaces where volume is important, price sensitivity is important, and I do try to like back into a particular price point for price diversification in the collection. And the market kind of tells you that, your competitors, their pricing will tell you where that needs to lie. I've just found that to be imperative for me on a personal and an aesthetic level. I need a beautiful double-faced cashmere wrap coat where I'm not thoughtful. I'm not thinking about usage of the material. I'm just making it as beautiful as I can, and then layering it with a trouser that I know needs to be at. If I do use this wool, I'm pricing myself out, so maybe I'll do it in a wool viscose blend, and I'll cut the cost. It still gives me a beautiful drape. It makes it a bit sportier, and I need to hit a particular price point, so maybe I can't put this hardware on it, so I should change it. Maybe I should add a waistband and just a hidden hook and bar closure as opposed to a statement button, so I can hit that price, like those sorts of things. And then a button down in a silk cotton instead of 100% silk. And maybe instead of the oversized tunic shirt that I want to do, maybe let's go for a more crop version. It still affects the same attitude, but better usage and all those sorts of things, right? That's to support that absurdly expensive but beautiful and covetable and heritage forever in my closet double-faced robe coat.
Dude, you are your father's son, because you broke that down like it was like a play in the NFL. Like, honestly, like I guarantee you very few people listening to this have ever thought about fashion the way you just broke it down and why things are made the way they're made. That was really, really great insight. I appreciate you sharing that, because literally, I guarantee you very few people even understand that. Really cool.
That's what eats up my brain.
You've met kind of an interesting intersection over the last, 2 years. You moved to LA. What brought you to Los Angeles?
Well, one of my early angel investors, he and his husband. I should say a statement again. One of my first angel investors, he and his husband moved here from New York, and there was an investment opportunity that fell through for me 3 years ago. I also was the end of a relationship, and my grandmother passed away, and so I looked at everything differently. Like, nothing mattered in the same way after all that happened in those 3 months. So I came to visit California and stayed with them at their apartment, and they had been big proponents of me moving here, and I was supposed to come for 5 days, and I ended up staying for 3 weeks. I'm still grateful to Jason Bolden and Adair Curtis for that, and went back to New York and just knew that I needed to be here. I saw places where I could buy fabric. I saw places where I could make clothes, and I also saw open space and open sky, and it just affected the relief that this kind of broken-hearted country boy needed. And so I came here in September of 2016. So it's been 2.5 years for me here. And in that time, I've really been able to pivot the collection, walk into custom celebrity dressing, and then also begin building a collection with more autonomy and more thoughtfulness around my customers as opposed to stockists, i.e. stores. So I'm excited about showing this new collection this year.
So your last collection was when?
It was 3 years ago, my last full collection. It's autumn-winter 16, sorry.
Do you label it a hiatus? Do you label it what do you label a 3-year grace period?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I've called it a hiatus before. I've called it a furlough.
But you've also done custom styling, so it's not like it went away.
No, it never went away, and it still exists, and I've still delivered orders, and but as far as presenting a full collection, I haven't done that. The thing that mattered more to me at that point 3 years ago was my head and my heart, and I hadn't thought about those two things hadn't been more important than this collection in 3-4 years. So finally, it deserved more attention, and at the point where it did deserve more attention, it needed to leave New York. So yeah, whatever you want to call the time away, like, I've called it a myriad of things, but more than anything, I've called it like kind of like soul saving.
One of the good things I think about owning your own business is you get to do whatever you want.
Dude, completely.
You literally get to do whatever you want. And I don't know about you. I'm sure I'm speaking for you when I say this, but I did not start a business for other people to tell me what to do.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
It was the impetus was quite contrary to that.
So there's no reason to navigate it in any other way.
Right.
And unfortunately, with the fashion industry, they can oftentimes tell you the opposite of that. They can tell you that they determine what you need to do. And once I was kind of broken enough to see outside of that and realize, wait, I actually have the onus here. I have the agency here. No. Like, I don't have to live like this. I don't have to be on this loop. And there's got to be better ways to make better product and be better to myself. And like you said, it's my name on the label.
Right.
Literally.
Right. So I think it's worth pointing out too. So even though you haven't shown a full collection, you've been working for some other brands and projects and helping other people and consulting and
totally. I've been able to consult across menswear. I've been able to design direct for one fledgling label here in Los Angeles called Cult Gaia. I built out their collection from one bag basically to a full-fledged collection, additional bags, apparel, shoes, jewelry, all of that. I design direct currently for a contemporary women's brand, another one called Nicholas. I've consulted for a brand in London. I was there for a time with Ungaro. Consulted for other startups in New York. So I've done a myriad of things in this 2.5 years in Los Angeles. And I can say confidently it's made me a better designer.
I think it's really interesting, and I'll just make a parallel. It's almost like music producers these days. Like everybody's featuring different people and hiring different producers to produce X record or Y record. And I think that's really cool that you can sit here and say also that it's made you better as a result.
Yeah, man, it has. It's new challenges, new customers, new product materials, new price points. It's been...
You've had your hands in a lot of cookie jars.
Yeah,
it seems like. And in addition to that, let's talk about that for a minute. You spoke at Fashion and Feminism at the Barnes Foundation. What was that about? When did that take place?
So the Barnes is an amazing museum in Philly, and they had a symposium on fashion and feminism. I spoke there largely about intersectional feminism because they know that the kind of the central muse of my collection is my mom, who's a Black woman, and how I infuse a lot of my own personal cultural iconography into the collection. And at the same time, how my customer base is does not in any way skew racially. It's incredibly diverse. Just as many white customers as Black and the Asian as well.
Absolutely.
So feminism, intersectional feminism, the highlighting of the Black female in beauty and fashion spaces has been really important to me. So I was able to speak about that there. The year before, I spoke at MoMA, Museum of Modern Art, at Fashion is Kale. So the MoMA presented their first fashion exhibit in some major number of years.
So Fashion is Kale, a cheeky kind of name because kale was like the hot ingredient at the time.
Yes, and also there's a historical reference point for that.
Okay.
And I cannot speak to it because I do not remember. But I know
all right.
Maybe at some point it was fashion is something else. Fashion is spinach. I don't know. There's something else historical.
So it's a reference point.
It's a reference for something. Let's Google, kids.
Got it.
But yeah, that was amazing. I spoke alongside Wen Zhu, who's the CEO of Philip Lim, and the former CEO of Proenza Schooler. And it was an amazing conversation between the three of us. I not only learned a lot, but was able to speak and lobby for the position of independent designers on that panel. Speaking about building a business in this climate, authenticity and integrity in doing so, or at least the pursuit thereof. But yeah, and I've also done smaller speaking engagements largely around fashion and race over the past few years.
Sure. From
Parsons to other universities here in LA. It's become a really... I've come to love that opportunity and I'm grateful to speak to an experience in the world of fashion that has gone oft unhighlighted. And that's like the experience of African heritage people and African heritage muses in fashion.
Can you give us a preview of what you're about to show later this year? Or if not, that's cool.
Oh, no, come on, man. Of course.
I haven't seen sketches, man. I thought I was
You
going to
haven't
be
seen
privy.
sketches, man? What's lots of ease.
Okay.
The theme, it's funny. There's Ty Burrell, who's an actor from Modern Family.
Yes, he's hilarious. No, you've not told me the story.
Okay, so there is that show. I don't think it's on the air anymore, but it would use your DNA to basically posit your lineage. And
a show on television?
Yeah, I think it was on PBS.
I don't know, man.
I can't remember who, but they would it was basically like 21 and Me or
23 and Me.
23 and Me.
46 chromosomes. So it's
exactly.
Half of it.
23 and Me. It was basically, they would take your DNA and basically let you know like what your likelihood of your lineage. And help.
That sounds dangerous,
dude.
As a production for television.
Yeah, well, I'm sure if it gets too iffy, it just doesn't make it to.
Oh,
the
true.
screen.
Yeah, fair enough.
But with Ty, turns out that Ty's ancestor that brought his family to Portland, Oregon, was a Black woman freed slave. So his family is in Oregon, and this freed slave garnered land on the Homestead Act. And she was freed from a Mississippi plantation, somehow made her way to Oregon. And that is how Ty Burrell's family is now in Oregon. And that story just really like ignited something in me because
Where did you hear that story?
On
that TV show?
On that show.
Oh,
yeah.
no kidding. Okay.
On that show.
Got it.
And it just really, it ignited something in me. I mean, for me, the images of beauty, life, nurturing, nourishment, support, kindness, love, all of that were black women for me, right? Like I was a black boy in the world, and those were the faces and the women, right? The people, not just the women, the people were black women. And so to then have this, and to know that I'm actively presenting narratives around black women in my clothing for the benefit of all women and men, I then looked at this story as almost an extension of that desire on my part. Like you have this white man in Oregon who lives the life of a straight white man, and his lineage is connected to the hard-fought pursuit of a black woman. And the interconnectivity that we can all garner from stories like that, the importance to not leave anyone's story behind, to not overly aggrandize anyone's story, to not extract or leave anyone out of the narrative. That idea is just so highlighted in a story like that. It made me think about my grandmother. It made me think about what all I saw her pursue in my life, and my mother, what all I saw her pursue. It took me back to her on that set building line at the tool factory, like all of these things. So all that being said, there are some Western references. There are some like Wild Wild West iconography and things of that nature that I'm trying to kind of parse through with this collection. There are some hiking references in imagining what this woman's pursuit could have looked like, and using that as an aesthetic point of reference for this collection.
Well, I'm pumped. I can't wait to see it.
I can't wait to see it either.
So
we're working on it.
Right. So you're in the middle of that.
Yeah, we are.
That's cool.
Sourcing has been great. New materials. And just telling the same story. Like in going away, I definitely don't want to tell a different story, because even in this time away, so many people still engage with the collection and the images of the collection on social media. So I'm excited.
That's kind of the cool thing, right? Because those images live there every day.
They do.
And they're not going away. It's not like, yesteryear where the blog posts, you'd have to scroll through pages and pages and pages to find that one article. I mean, unless you bookmarked it, obviously. But very cool. That's awesome.
Yeah, mate.
Well, I selfishly love having you in Los Angeles because I get to come up here and have lunch or go out to dinner or drinks and stuff, and it's always a riot.
Spend ridiculous amounts of money.
Yeah, well, we try to mitigate that, but fashion can be a disease. Yeah, one of my favorite memories, actually, since you've lived here, is introducing you to the Peterson Automotive Museum.
Well, I got the bug, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your new ride.
Putting me on blast.
Well,
that exhibit was
the
me,
exhibit that was released when we went was it was a Porsche specific event. Really just like the history of everything Porsche, really. Yeah. It wasn't just the 911, it was the brand.
Charted from the brand's inception all the way up to today.
Obviously I'm a Porsche nut. So what'd you buy, man?
I bought a Macan S. I love her. Her name's Priscilla.
Priscilla
Porsche.
Oh my God. That's so good.
I couldn't resist, man.
That's hilarious.
I love her, man. Oh boy, I love her.
Obviously, Priscilla's quick, she's fun, all that stuff.
Yeah.
But do cars play a role at all in inspiring your designs?
Yeah, definitely. Just particularly, German cars, I'd say.
Same.
The thoughtfulness around the design, the integrity around it. The Bauhaus was born out of a German way of approaching design. So it's just something that it really resonates with me. There's so much thoughtfulness in that car. There's so much attention to detail. The design is so identifiable, and the line of a Porsche has not drastically changed. Like the bones of it is always there.
Yeah, speaking of DNA.
Yeah.
It's not far.
Not far at all. And I love that kind of commitment to an aesthetic is something that I want to reflect in my collection and get better at doing so.
100%.
So yeah, man. And also like just cars in general. Like I remember my first car was my dad's BMW. So it was the first car he and my mom bought was a BMW 325e 87.
That's awesome.
And so when I turned 16, I got that car. And it was busted, but also beautiful. And I just felt like $1 million in that car. And I only drove it for a short while because I was a kid. I was running it into the ground.
Was it a manual?
Yeah, it was manual.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, man.
I learned to drive stick on a 5 Series BMW.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. I think it was an 84.
Okay.
It was my grandfather's, who then gifted it to my uncle, I think. And he either gifted it to my uncle or my uncle bought it off him real cheap. I can't remember. But yeah, I learned on a BMW myself.
We've never shared this story, man.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, super cool.
What so when you're not designing, when you're not working, when you and Priscilla aren't hanging out, what do you like to do?
What do I like to do? I'm always at some galleries, museums, art, man, art, day in and day out. The benefit of being in LA is like just being outside. So the hiking culture is something that I'm a part of on a regular basis.
Sure.
I'm not a fan of the gym, so
well, that's the funny thing too, because gyms are so expensive in New York City. Because that's kind of your only choice on certain levels. Yeah. And especially in January.
Yeah, exactly.
Not your
February,
only choice,
March,
but
April.
Whereas here you can work out outside, so
year round.
The gyms are super cheap. If you ever change your mind, they're like $20 a month.
Exactly. So yeah, that, man, and food culture. I'm always eating. I do miss my bike. I biked for most, if not all, of the 11 years, probably at least 9 of the 11 years I was in New York. I biked, and so I still haven't established a dialogue for biking out here.
I'm gonna pivot for a second. Let's talk about your personal style.
Okay. Okay.
Because I know
not reflected today.
I know you. I know your favorite moment of mine is when I worked for Gucci and I was wearing suits and surfing a lot, and so I had a pretty brown tan.
Brown,
and I remember you just telling me like, this is my favorite season of West.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely, hands down my favorite season.
But you're a very eclectic. I mean, I'm just using that term generously. Be it hairstyle, hair length, braid, no braid, fro it out.
I know, man.
Man, if I were black, I would totally have a fro. That's just,
why do all white boys say that?
Because you want what you can't have. But now, how do you describe your personal style? I mean, it's all over the place. Like you could dress it up, dress it down. I know in New York, stereotypically, it's like all black in New York.
I don't even know how to describe my personal style.
You started rocking Vans when you first got out here?
I did. I went through that whole phase. But I've always been that boy. I remember like middle school and high school, like for a while I was dressing like a skater kid. Never touched a skateboard in my life. Then I went through this whole alternative stage, and then I went super preppy. Then I went Abercrombie. it's just I don't know. There's
I feel like that's normal though.
yeah,
Like especially back then, 90s. I mean, grunge.
yeah. You had to go through.
You had
all
to
of
have
it.
a
That's
flannel.
true.
You know, you had your Kurt Cobain.
So what are you trying to say?
Nirvana.
Like, why am I still doing it?
No,
in
no,
my
no, no, no,
30s?
no. Well, hey, the 90s came back. That's why.
Maybe that's. I mean,
It's a disease, man.
I love clothes. I just think they're so much fun.
Right.
I love the armor of it. I just.
Why do you use the term armor?
Wow, that's a good question. Because I do feel like I protect myself, or at the very least, I package myself through my clothing, and it has been a mode of self-protection. It's been a mode of elevation. I've been able to use clothing to affect a myriad of things. And, like, not to get too heavy, but clothing when your physical identities can be problematic for people, right? So navigating the world as a black man, clothing can mean a lot of things. I mean, frankly speaking, Trayvon Martin is dead today largely because of his hoodie. So there are so many references that they get brought up, and I see how clothing has opened doors, clothing has affected a familiarity, clothing has ingratiated me, clothing has comforted me, clothing has made me stand up straight when I needed to stand up straight and affect a class affiliation that's not my own. Like, it's just done a lot of things for me.
I think that's the cool thing about it too, is that it can literally change who you are.
It can, man. Or highlight a different part of you.
Like I don't remember the shoe designer. I can't remember who said this, but he said something to the effect of like, I wanted to design a shoe because it will literally make you a different person, because you will walk differently based on the shoe you're wearing. Yeah. And there's no two ways about it. Like
exactly.
For a woman, for example, if she's wearing a sneaker or a high heel, no way she's walking the same way in
not
both
at
those
all.
shoes. So, but the interesting thing I think about what you were saying about the armor comment, Tom Ford too said the same for himself.
Did he?
That's a lot of the reason. I don't know if he said that in an interview that I read, or if it's a line that is in A Single Man, the very autobiographical film that he produced.
Yes.
So those of you who haven't seen
favorites.
A Single Man, it was Tom Ford's first film, shot very, very beautifully. He did all the apparel, obviously, and the clothing and the styling.
I also love Nocturnal Animals, which is his second one.
Second film, yeah.
Both beautiful.
The house in the Nocturnal Animals is incredible. It's in Malibu. I know exactly where it is.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, it's insane. It's like my grail house.
Of
like
course you know
just
where it is.
concrete, steel, glass, just beautiful.
It's a gorgeous house.
At any rate. But yeah, so again, kind of on that
I like that.
Tom Ford tip.
I'm going to use that, as Tom says.
I've always thought of fashion too, and we'll wrap it up here in a second. I think Ralph Lauren, really, it's the fantasy, right?
Yeah.
It takes you away
is.
from whatever vitriol that you're, taking into your life on a daily basis. I think it's an escape,
Yeah.
And then again, it also, you can dress based on your mood. I think that's what really draws me towards the industry, is that almost like music, right? Like, you're going to bob your head to something or tap your foot to something else of a different genre and dress accordingly, potentially. And I think that's kind of one of the interesting things about it.
Yeah, definitely. I remember saying in several interviews, when it comes to the question of, what is it you want your clothing to do? And I was like, well, the goal was to give men and women the tools to aesthetically represent themselves in the world with more power, confidence, and elegance. And I saw that I saw clothing do that for my mother, namely, and my father and my grandmother. I saw them navigate more light-footed and happier and elegant and confident on the weekends, particularly on Sundays, very differently from how they navigated their day-to-day lives. And clothing completely does that for me. And I want to give people the tools to do that more effectively if they love what I do.
Well, I mean, you're well on your way.
I better be.
Charles,
the day that I'm not, Wes, tell me to stop.
No, man. No. Full disclosure, I will do so. I don't think we have that problem. Charles, it's been awesome, man.
Dude, thank you so much, man.
Thanks for taking the time.
Of course. I do whatever you want me to do.
All right, man. We'll see you soon.
Cheers.
Bye. I know this episode was a little longer than most, and honestly, it flew by for me when recording. So, Charles, thank you so much for dedicating the time. Always great to see you, my man. And again, guys, thank you so much for listening. Can't do this without you. And please visit clearaudio.com, CLEER audio.com, to get some of the best headphones I've ever used. Quite frankly, they're just super comfortable and very, very functional. The noise canceling, like I said last week, is just second to none on airplanes with crying babies. And in addition to that, also wanted to give a quick shout out to Jensen Reed and Super Beautiful. Thank you so much for laying down the track for these episodes. And we will catch you next week. Thanks so much.